What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the W.A.D.E Concept Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Wade Plemons, and thank you guys for joining me. Tristan's already in the chat. What's going on, my man? Thank you all for watching. It's Thursday. I know it's been a little bit since I last saw you guys. I just saw you guys Saturday, but we're back. And today's episode, we're going to do a couple different things. We're going to talk about UFC 222, we're going to kind of recap what we saw, what happened, some of the fallout from that, and then we're going to talk about some other MMA news. And then at the end of the podcast, I got to let you guys know what's going on next week because we're going to have kind of a calling back to Christmas time of the W.A.D.E Concept Podcast. So should be fun. I hope you guys are ready. And again, anytime I get on here, I sometimes forget, but I always want to thank you guys so much for supporting this podcast and letting me do this as kind of a workshop for what I want to do, with my career and with, my profession going forward. So thank you guys so much. The links for all the stuff you guys want to see, Instagram, Twitter, anything pertaining to myself or this podcast will be in the description. Check those things out if you haven't yet, and follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter. I'm going to try to start using those a little more. I'm not the biggest on social media, but I'm going to try to use it more because obviously I'm going to be an MMA journalist or I'm going to be covering this sport. I need to use my social media, so we're going to do that. Tristan, what's going on, man? All right, so let's get into what happened at UFC 222. A very interesting card. A very, very interesting card. Shogun already with the spoilers. Jay, what's going on? What's popping, everyone? What's popping? See, now the energy levels are coming up. Now y'all are in the chat. Y'all bring the energy levels out of me. But yeah, let's talk about 222, man. So overall, as I was in the moment of the card, the more I watched it, the more I thought, man, these are some great, great fights. Yeah, the fight that never happened. Those are some great fights that were going on, and I kind of got caught up in them just being great fights. And you look back on the card, they were great fights. They were great finishes, introductions to fighters I had never either never seen or just seen a little bit of, like an Alexander Hernandez. But when you look back on it, man, the UFC is really stumbling out of the gate to start the year this year. And that's not to say that these aren't great fights. I mean, the O'Malley fight was great. He showed great heart. Obviously, the big knockout from Brian Ortega. The main event kind of left a little bit to be desired. But you got introductions, like I said, Alexander Hernandez. You got to see some really cool, even, Sugar Sean O'Malley. But these cards that the UFC put on to start the year are lacking, right? And they're lacking in star power, but at the same time, what we're seeing from these cards are hopefully the future. You're seeing a guy like Brian Ortega step up and beat a legend like Frankie Edgar. And you cannot believe that something like that could happen to Frankie because it never has. But you're seeing a young guy take the reins and start to step up in that 145 division. And granted, Alexander Hernandez has a long way to go in that 155 division, but another young guy. Sean O'Malley, young guy, and the youth in the UFC is starting to take over and finally starting to try to, I guess, push their way into this veteran status that's kind of been held down by the same people for the last 5 to 6 years. We really need that going forward if we're going to be able to expand this sport into, create new stars and promote young talent. And not just the Sage Northcutts and the Paige Van Zants and some of the people that have gotten the push kind of, I would say, prematurely, but people that really are coming into their own as fighters and really deserve to be put into that upper echelon and are earning it. Brian Ortega's earning that shot. So it was a crazy card. Like I said, I don't know if it was necessarily one of the best, as far as the draw, but we do have that coming up with 223, and we'll talk a little bit about that either this week or next week. All right. So we got... All right, so we got everybody talking about Ortega and Frankie. So we'll just talk about that first off, and we'll kind of work back from it. So what we saw in this fight, and I went back and watched it today. I watched it yesterday. I watched it a couple times because what I thought happened the first time I watched it was kind of what I ended up, going back to. A flip-flop on it. But basically, what you saw in the fight were a couple different things. You saw Frankie Edgar, you saw Brian Ortega really respecting the power of Frankie Edgar to start the fight, right? To start the fight. And you saw Frankie employing a lot of, fury, straight punches coming at Brian Ortega kind of straight down the line, throwing a lot of straight punches, then following up with that big overhand right. That's kind of how he'd end his combination and he'd get out. It was quickly in, furious on the way in, and then to get right back out. Someone just texted me. Jacob Gonzalez just texted me. What the heck? But when will that's how Frankie fights. He gets in, furious punches, throws the big overhand, and he got out. And Brian Ortega was giving respect to that. He was backing away from the shot, sliding, posting with the left hand. Sorry, you can't see that, but posting with the left hand on Frankie's, on his head, on his shoulder, to keep that distance, to keep that reach advantage he had. And once he realized, and you kind of see this in the fight, and he said this afterward, but I went back to watch it to make sure, he got cracked with a big overhand right. And sorry, guys. Yeah, let Kelsey know what's going on in the chat. Tell her to shout her out in the chat, guys. I will be talking about UFC London, and we will be predicting. But, Jay, I'll get right to that one second. But, yeah, you kept seeing him post his left hand on the shoulder, on the head. He would even go right hand if he was going to slide out the left side. But that was basically to get away from Frankie, because he at the start of the fight, he respected the power of Frankie Edgar. Once he got cracked with that overhand right, even he said this in the press conference, he didn't respect the power anymore because he knew he wasn't in any danger. And once you saw that, you saw Brian Ortega standing in the pocket and then moving forward on Frankie, right? And Frankie, again, his best asset, and when he comes with that fury on guys, is to shoot that power double, right? To shoot that double leg and throw someone on their head. That's Frankie Edgar's game. That's always been Frankie Edgar's game. That's what he's good at. And if you're not named Jose Aldo, really no one can stop him, right? He comes in with a flurry of punches. He throws the double jab, straight right hand, then something over the top that leads into a double leg takedown. What you saw in this fight was he tried that, and he was doing a good job of mixing things up. I thought Frankie was actually winning the fight just based off of how many significant strikes he had landed and just the movement and the pressure he was putting on Brian Ortega. But again, Brian Ortega very calm, moved, just slid out of the way, posted with the left hand, kept his distance, kept that reach that he needed to use and take advantage of, and he did in this fight. But when Frankie shot for the double, immediately what happened? Brian Ortega looped that arm around and grabbed the neck, and you heard it audibly in the crowd. You didn't just see it, and you weren't just doing it yourself, because I know I was. I guarantee you guys in the chat were too. What I was doing was going, oh no, as soon as Brian Ortega gets that hand clasped under for the guillotine, you freak out because you know how quickly he can cinch that up. And I think Frankie saw the danger in it too, and he let go of the double leg. And when that was a big turning point in the fight, and immediately, as soon as Frankie felt that pressure, and so did everybody else watching, he quit shooting the double. And it wasn't like he quit shooting it altogether, but he wasn't shooting a Frankie Edgar double leg takedown. It was kind of a flurry of punches and then kind of half-hearted takedown into a left hook. He tried to switch it up, and he was trying to switch his game plan, but once Brian Ortega knew he couldn't get hit as hard. This is what he said after the press conference. He said, I didn't respect his power afterward because I didn't feel any damage when he was hitting me. And when the takedowns weren't available, then the fight swayed toward a Brian Ortega. And obviously the step-in elbow caught Frankie. I think it caught Frankie because Frankie wasn't expecting it. And because when Frankie comes in with a flurry of punches like he was, throwing the double jab right hand, all down the middle, all quick, all moving straight forward at you, you can't really throw the left hook behind it to catch him because, again, he's already in and out by that point. But something shorter, something quicker that can catch him while he's still in is that step-in lead elbow, which Brian Ortega threw, and it rocked Frankie. And from there, obviously, Brian Ortega did a great job of staying composed, and he was setting up that uppercut even from the beginning of the fight. He just wanted to catch Frankie coming in with that uppercut. Well, the opening was there, obviously, at that point. Frankie was trying to clinch. Brian Ortega did a good job of throwing the hands off, stepping under, throwing the uppercuts, and finishing the fight. I mean, it was insane how quickly that fight changed from that double leg takedown. In my opinion, that was the point when the fight was changed completely. Because Brian Ortega did not feel the power of Frankie. He didn't respect that power. That's one thing. But when you take away his big offensive advantage in that double leg takedown, then that's all Brian Ortega needed. He didn't have to defend himself off his back, which he could have, but then he didn't respect the power. And then coming forward, he knew, okay, if he takes me down or he tries, I'm going to lock up this guillotine in a heartbeat. If he tries that overhand again, it's not hurting me, so I can stand with this guy. That's all the confidence he needed to win that fight. You guys are going wild in the chat. What are we saying? Frankie looked tired before that fight. It's tough, man. Shogun, I'm with you. The thing about that is when Frankie Edgar took that fight, he didn't have to at all. And for me, obviously, you guys saw my honest reaction on the podcast. It was nuts. Holy cow. Brian Ortega with this, uppercut that lifts Frankie Edgar off of his feet to win the fight. And in that moment, you're just so shocked and stunned by what happened that you can't really fathom this more emotional side of things for Frankie Edgar. Because I'm a big Frankie Edgar fan, and I think anybody that watches MMA or covers this sport, how can you not be? The guy has been around for forever, done everything the right way. A legend in the sport, beat some of the biggest names to ever do it at lightweight, at featherweight. And in that moment, of course, you celebrate that knockout, and it's just a wow moment, and it's spectacular. But then after I got off of the podcast and I was laying in bed watching the press conferences, and obviously Frankie didn't show, you start to think, and you almost feel bad. You almost feel like MMA lost something with that shot, right? Because Frankie was just one of these guys that was always held up by, never been finished, always, found a way to recover, a massive heart in the cage, always gritty, couldn't put him away. And it just shows you, man, these MMA gods, at some point, they tap you on the shoulder and they say, hey, man, it's time. And, I'm not saying that Frankie's done. By all means, by no means is he done. But it's going to be a change for Frankie Edgar. Some people even thinking he might go down to bantamweight at 135 and compete, which he said he can make that weight before. But, man, it was tough to watch. At the same time, it was one of the most exhilarating knockouts you'll see. So that was a crazy fight. That made the card for me. That made the card worth my money because of just how much happened with that fight itself, and just walking through the fight over and over and over to see where did that fight change? Why did Frankie Edgar stop the double leg? Why did Brian Ortega stop, posting and moving away and stop taking advantage of that reach and start walking into Frankie Edgar? And it was all because, he felt the power of Frankie. It wasn't enough, and he stuffed the takedown with the guillotine. Watching Frankie, and then again, that's the same thing I felt, Tristan. In that moment, I was just so shocked that, of course, it's a spectacular knockout that you just react to it, right? But in the post-fight and everything, you go back and look, and you're like, man, I wish that it wasn't Frankie that it had to happen to, And that's kind of the emotion you get from a lot of the MMA community, is just to say, man, it was a crazy knockout. I'm glad for Brian Ortega, but man, it'd have to be Frankie. And Frankie's a true warrior. He didn't have to take that fight. He could have waited on Max, and Max could have come back. They could have had their championship fight. And it just shows you, again, why people love Frankie Edgar so much. He took that fight when he didn't have to, on short notice, and, put all his chips on the table and said, let's go. And it didn't work out for him, and that happens sometimes. But, again, by no means I don't think he's done. He is a little older. He should fight Cyborg next. Jesus Christ. He's a little older, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with him. What's the point of Frankie to keep going? Jay, it's a good question. But again, when you're a fighter, when you are one of these guys, and this is what you do for a living, there's a lot of pride and a lot of sacrifice that goes into these careers, right? So as you and I on the outside looking at it, we can go, what's the point for Frankie to keep doing it? He's a legend. He's won championships. He's beaten the who's who in every division that he's competed in. Why? What else has he got to prove? What else does he need to keep going for? I mean, obviously, that paycheck's going to be there, but other than that, what does he need to do? And it's really easy for myself, you, anybody else to tell that guy, we're not him. It's the same thing that with the Michael Bisping argument. Like, what else do they need to do? A fighter is going to fight. That's what they love to do. At least that's what Frankie loves to do. And the only person that's going to be able to tell him to stop or tell him no anymore is going to be him. And as dangerous as that can become sometimes, and because sometimes it's hard for a guy to look in the mirror retroactively and say, I should have done it this time, I should have done it that time. But to be able to self-reflect and say, it's time, it takes a lot, man. It takes a lot to walk away from that. So, realistically, what else does he have to keep going for? I don't know, maybe one more shot. But in his opinion, he could have 3, 4, 5 reasons that he wants to keep going, It's just different when you talk to the guy that's actually doing it. He's 100% he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people, Tristan, wanted that kind of Mount Rushmore of only guy that hadn't been finished title, But it is what it is. Frankie's a true warrior, courageous in defeat, and he'll be back. So that was by far the craziest point of the card. And from that, we will talk about kind of what's going on with Max Holloway and Brian Ortega. So as soon as the fight ended, and everybody tweets, and obviously a lot of the fighters are watching the fight, but as soon as the fight ends, Max just puts at UFC 226, basically saying he wants to fight Brian Ortega at the July card, the big International Fight Week card at UFC 226. You know how Dana White is about some of these things sometimes. He's not too quick to give a confirmed title shot. So there was that kind of waiting period for the first 2 days to see is Brian, or I mean, it's common sense that he gets the title shot, but you never know with Dana White and the UFC and what kind of money they want to do. So, in those first couple of days, you didn't really see what would happen. And then Brian Ortega actually did get the call from Dana White and confirmed he will be getting that title shot. I don't know the time and place yet. They're still kind of watching Max Holloway's recovery. Brian Ortega did say he wanted to take a couple of months off and again, work with the Brian Ortega, the T-City Foundation, which is, again, amazing thing that he does. And another reason he's going to be a superstar or is on the cusp of becoming a superstar. So I'm a big fan of everything Ortega's doing. It just shows you, man, the more this guy fights, the more his stand-up and the more his other kind of hats of MMA are evolving. Like, yes, he has his submissions. Yes, he's a black belt on the ground, probably one of the best in the UFC on the ground. But his stand-up's getting better. He's understanding the reach and distance of stand-up fighting. And he's understanding throughout a fight what you need to do to adjust to the fighter in front of you more and more and more. Right? Now he's taken on, backgrounds from wrestler to stand-up striker to Cub Swanson, who's a black belt on the ground, but again, another stand-up guy, and he's finishing these guys. So it's going to be interesting. Max Holloway, obviously, a little bit taller. The reach is a little bit more there, but you watch that fight, and they said Ortega had a 1-inch reach and a 1-inch height advantage. And Ryan, chill. And in the actual cage, he looks so much bigger, not just, weight-wise, but just height, and his reach looks so much more, I guess, exasperated than Frankie Edgar's did. It's just like he was a bigger guy. So I don't think Max Holloway's going to have such a huge advantage in the reach and the height against Brian Ortega, and that fight's going to be interesting. Max Holloway will scrap with anyone on the feet, is underrated on the ground. His guard is one of the best before I'd seen Brian Ortega at 145. So it's going to be a crazy, crazy fight. I don't know how to pick that yet. I have to watch more. I have to go back and watch, all kind of fight tape on Max Holloway to be able to kind of see where he can take advantage of Brian Ortega. And it probably is somewhere on the feet, but we'll have to see when that time comes. Can I turn up my volume? Yes, Shogun, I can. I'll just move my mic a little closer. How's that? Give me a thumbs up. Give me a 1 in the chat if that's pretty good volume. Sorry about that. Ortega does have a natural instinct. The guy is just a finisher. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. He's a finisher. I mean, when he smells blood in the water, he's going to calm and compose, but is going to come after that kill, 100%. So yeah, that's it. When that fight happens and when it's made officially, we'll talk more about it then. But man, what a fight! And then obviously the main event, like I said, left a little to be desired. But it showed me a couple of things, and I don't know if I'm on the. Same train as everyone with this Cyborg win. Of course, it was a great win. She showed her power once again. I mean, the Kunitskaya girl did not want to be in that cage as soon as she got hit with the big overhand to start the fight. You could tell she was a little bit intimidated. But a couple things stood out to me. And with news we got today, Cyborg's not going to be fighting Amanda Nunes anytime in May. Maybe for 226 if she can get past Raquel Pennington, which is going to be the main or one of the fights on UFC 224. That was announced today. So that fight won't be happening in May. We'll have to wait maybe July, maybe after to get that fight. But what we're seeing with Cyborg is, again, I've said this many times on the podcast. You guys know this. They don't have anybody for this girl to fight. I mean, Amanda Nunes is kind of the last girl left. And then, what are you going to do? You're going to have to throw your hands up and say, okay, we got to sign Megan Anderson from Invicta or find her someone, that can make that weight. And right now, I don't know who it is. I have no idea. But what we're seeing is Cyborg is fighting a very easy set. I want to say easy, but a very limited set of opponents, right? Tanya Everton didn't really have any wrestling. Kunitskaya didn't really do anything and still got some kind of single low ankle pick. I don't even know what you would call it, a low single, and got Cyborg's back. And the reason I'm saying all this is to say Cyborg has holes in her game. And at first look, you might not see it. Shevchenko might be an option, but Shevchenko will stand there and strike with Cyborg the entire fight. I'm not going to say I wouldn't love to see it. I would. But Shevchenko's grappling, I think, could have a factor in the fight. And the reason I'm saying this is because I watched Cyborg get pushed around by Holly Holm in that 219 fight. On the cage, in the clinch. And this is a strong, big Cyborg getting pushed around by a kickboxer. Getting clinched. And the only reason that nothing happened was because when Holly got the clinch and got it so easily on the cage, literally from the center of the octagon, double underhooks on the cage, she didn't really know what to do from there. She kind of just held it there. And it surprised me. Because, again, Cyborg's this bigger girl, has to cut a lot of weight to get to 145, black belt off of her back. You would think the grappling is there. But then you watch, that fight with Holly, and again, Holly, walked her around wherever she wanted on that cage and put her against the cage. Then you see this Kunitskaya fight, and again, it's more of a cow, like falling down the cage, grab on and hold on to something, but she gets a low single, I guess it's a low single, grabs onto the ankle of Cyborg and trips her, gets her back, and pushes her up against the cage. Guys, I'm telling you, this isn't, I don't want to say that Cyborg is, Cyborg is one of the best, if not the best female fighter I've ever seen, but there are holes there. And I think if you can find a girl, these wrestlers in the 135 division, I would be paying attention. If you find a girl like a Sarah McMahon, try to push her up in weight. Maybe a girl like a Jessica Andrade. She's fought at 135 before. Try to get her weight up there, because if you can find a way to get this girl to the ground, it's not the hardest thing in the world to do to clinch her, to wrestle her. I'm just saying there are holes there. Cyborg, she said she was born like DJ. She doesn't have the opponents yet. Look, for what I can consider too early, Cyborg's been fighting girls for a long, long time, right? Kickboxing, MMA, just outside of the UFC. I know there are girls out there that are 145 pounds, 150 pounds that are doing this as a sport, as, maybe not a profession that they're doing by themselves, but there are girls out there. If it's Invicta, if it's ONE FC, if it's somewhere else, there are girls doing it. Bellator has their own women's division, not at the 145 pound, but they have 35ers and 25ers. If you can find a girl, and even if it's a 35er, that can give this girl problems by grappling, and again, maybe the rematch with Holly, she understands that she has a little bit of an advantage in the clinch if they decide to go down that route someday. And really do some stuff with it, but there's holes there. But I do like what Ryan said. She might just be a little bit early of her time. That same can be said for Benson Henderson. A lot of different people that were ahead of their time in this sport. So, who won that fight? Cyborg did, handily. Cyborg threw 4 right hands and won the fight. Kunitskaya was clearly overmatched standing up. And as soon as she got hit, you could see it. Cyborg versus Artem Lubov. Real question, though. Honest question. Cyborg versus CM Punk. Who wins? Chat, let me know. Because, honest to God, I'm taking Cyborg. I'm taking Cyborg versus half of the 135 men. I'm just saying. I mean, Cyborg puts it on CM Punk. You know what I'm saying? They kind of weigh the same before weight cut. Don't even know weight cut. Maybe go catch weight 160. If she eats a right hand, if CM Punk eats one of her right hands, it might be good night. I'm just saying. Well, obviously, Ryan, there's a difference between 135 contenders coming up to 145, but at the moment, they're not filling the division out, so that's really the only option you have. Unless you go out and pick 8, 9 different girls that are 145 and bring them in without any experience in the UFC, that's what you kind of have to do. They're not building that division at all. I think if you can find some girls that are already in the UFC and bring them up while you look for talent, because you're not going to be able to find 8, 9 girls to go and build to fill that division out in a month or 2 months. But or even a year, as these fights keep going for Cyborg, she's going to exhaust everyone. So while you're looking for that division, or while you're finding that, these girls that are already in the UFC that see that, they might not be getting that title shot at their division yet. Why not give them a chance to go? And especially some of these wrestlers, some of these girls that are cutting a lot to make 135. I know there's girls there. Sorry, we're throwing him out of the stadium. That would be pretty sick. But yeah, so I don't know, man. Cyborg is dominant as of right now, but there are holes there, and I do want to see one of these girls, because this is the thing. If you're going to go into the cage with Cyborg, you're going to have to eat a couple. And Kunitskaya obviously was a little intimidated, and for good reason. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Cyborg throws a meat hook for a right hand. And it hits you, and it's going to hurt. But some girl is going to have to go in there without, like a Holly Holm, without, being intimidated and say, look, yeah, I'm going to have to eat a couple, but try to grapple with this girl. Really see what she's got in her grappling game, because that, again, it's like only a couple of examples, but you kind of have to nitpick with Cyborg because she is so good. If you're going to find holes, you have to a little bit nitpick and say, okay, well, this could be improved, because if not, you're not going to find anything. But especially in the clinch, in the stand-up clinch, and even in her takedown defense, I've seen holes there. Is Stipe versus Cormier 226? Yes, Jay, that is going to be the main event of 226. Cormier versus Miocic. But that's pretty much, really quickly, Sean O'Malley got the W on Andre Sukumtat. Probably not the best idea from Sukumtat after Sean O'Malley had hurt his leg in the third round. Probably not the best idea to take the guy down and lay on him for the rest of the third, knowing you're down 2 rounds. You never know what goes through a guy's head during the fight, so who knows what he was thinking, but big win by O'Malley. A lot of people really like Sean O'Malley. I told you guys this when we were doing our MMA Weekly last week. Gets in the cage after the fight. Joe Rogan comes in, interviews him. The crowd pops, huge for him. Like, he was getting a lot of cheers in that arena. This guy could be one of these guys the UFC latches onto and says, you could be one of our next stars. I'm not saying he's a star yet, because he's far from that. But that's the way these things start, right? And if you're going to have a guy that can promote himself or, engage the fan base in some way that other fighters cannot do, that's the way it starts. So look out for that guy. I don't think 224 has a main set yet. Actually, it's either they don't have one set or Alistair Overeem and Curtis Blades. I know that's one of the fights. I don't know if that's the main, though. Yeah, you got to, if you're going to, as Sean O'Malley, if I'm him, you got to start somewhere, and that's just, being able to galvanize fans to be on your side just by, because if you watch in the third round, he tries to get to his feet and fight, and that's what people want to see, a guy that's in there that truly wants to fight, that truly wants to be in there and loves what he's doing, and Sean O'Malley showed that, as well as some pretty technical skills. He showed that spinning back fist high kick in the first round. He showed a high kick, then a reverse hook kick right after it. The guy's got skills. And I'm excited to see him keep fighting. The only thing that scares me a little bit about Sean O'Malley is when he lands kicks, he lands a lot with his feet. And at 135, you can break some bones in your foot pretty quickly. And if he keeps doing that, you don't want to see a guy land with his foot every time he throws a kick. Yeah, fans love flashy moves, but they also love a fighter that wants to fight. And in that third round, he showed he wasn't just all flash. He showed, okay, look, I've got substance here. I'm here for a fight. He was on one leg, hopping around, trying to punch Andre Sukumtat, and then Sukumtat took him down, which I don't understand why he did that, but who knows. 223 is going to be scary. That can't be pay-per-view. Well, 224 still got some stuff they have to put on that card. They're still filling it out. So they've got time, too. They've got 223 is in this next April, and I think 224 is in May. So they've got a couple months here to figure some out. But yeah, that was. We'll see what happens with 224. 222, I would say if I gave it a grade, fights, I guess, on the entire card, the fights themselves, B+. B+, and then, the pay-per-view draw, probably a C-, D+. Wasn't really the greatest draw, but some great fights. But that's kind of our recap. Should have been lighting him up with some of those Superman punches. Well, honestly, if you're Andre Sukumtat in that situation, you don't really have to do a lot. You stand up, you back off of him, you get the referee to stand him up, and the referee will disqualify him if he can't fight. Maybe you throw 1 or 2 leg kicks. If he's not able to even stand up, he's going to be disqualified. Look at the Michael Chandler fight from Bellator a couple of, I think, late last year. He had something going on with his nerves in his feet, and he couldn't stand, and he was wobbly. He was rolling his ankle around everywhere, and they stopped the fight. That's going to happen if he just lets him stand up, but he decided to take him down. I'm not sure what that was, but yeah, that was the card. Obviously, Mackenzie Dern with the W over Ashley Yoder. She's got to learn some more stand up. Not the most polished stand up fighter in the world, but she's very, very new to this, and that'll just take time. A lot of people are really liking Ketlin Vieira. I don't want to say it was an upset win over. Yeah, Ryan, that's what I was saying. I don't like that Sean O'Malley lands with his foot when he's kicking. You're not supposed to. That should be a shin bone to the head, or a shin bone to shin bone, or to the body. You're landing with the feet, especially close to the toes, like middle of the foot. The only time you should land with the foot is if you're throwing a wheel kick and you want to land with the back of that heel. So I don't really like that too much. And you watch him and you hear a lot of slappy. Like when he lands, it's like slapping, right? And that's just because he's flipping that foot out when he's doing it. So that's a little scary. But I'm sure he'll correct that over time. So we'll see. I missed one of the comments. 1 second, guys. Holly made sense. Ryan, I hear you, man. That's the thing, though. If you're not going to debut someone against Cyborg, you have to build the division. And while you're building it, you still need your champion active, right? So say you want to build the 145 division, but you only have, as of right now, you have Cyborg, you have Tanya Evinger, and you have Kunitskaya. Holly's still going to fight 135. She's not going to be 145 the entire time. If you're going to build that division, and Cyborg just has those three fighters, what are you going to have? Those three fighters fight each other for the next 2 months, then have Cyborg fight, and she's out of the picture for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 months. While that's happening, you have to have people come and fight her. And when you build a new division, if you're not going to go the tough route, which I thought was a good idea when they did with the women's 125 division, bring in all these girls, have like a tough series, do that, and then the winner, obviously, of that would get a title shot. I thought that would be something that could be good for 145. Maybe they do it in the future. But until then, she has to have opponents, especially if you're going to make her, I don't want to say the next Ronda Rousey, but put the hype machine behind her and call her a killer and be the next, you can't beat her. She's unbeatable, best women's fighter alive. She has to be active. So that's the only reason I think you have to keep her going. Yeah, that's why a lot of people were kind of giving Sean O'Malley a break when he did injure his foot, because people know, man, when you fight MMA and you land a kick the wrong way, yikes. Even when you land it the right way and a guy checks it, ask Luke Rockhold how it felt kicking Yoel Romero. Anderson Silva had the same problem, got snapped up. Imagine a 155 women's division. If we're going to go that way, we might have what's the girl's name that trains with Cyborg? We got to get her a division. We got to get her down in a division. Gabby, I don't know her last name, but that huge girl that trains with Cyborg. Gabby Garcia. Let's get her in the 185 women's division. Champ. Ronda left at the UFC at the right moment to maybe. I think Ronda, for her legacy, I guess, it just didn't do her a lot of good to leave right after. Gabby Garcia's a monster. It didn't do her a lot of good press to not really do any kind of media to lose the way she did against Holly, and then to come back and lose the way she did against Amanda Nunes. Probably would have been better served to leave after the Holly Holm fight. But yeah, Gabby is a freak. Anyway, that was our 222 card. But after that, we've had, and then obviously Andrei Arlovsky beat up on Stefan Struve. Arlovsky making a second run at heavyweight. Showed some, athleticism that we hadn't seen from Andrei Arlovsky in a long time. I mean, a really polished boxer, but I think he had 4 takedowns, which is more than I'd ever seen from Andrei Arlovsky before, and he's been doing it for a long time. Stefan Struve, I don't understand it, man. He's 7 feet and somehow can't find a way to utilize his reach or his kicks or anything. He fights like he's 6'2", I don't get it. He's 7 feet tall. For God's sakes, throw a jab. Throw one long jab and keep the guy away from you. Or just a front kick. Just a push kick. Like one of those stabbing Conor McGregor front kicks. Who's going to get inside of that range? I mean, I guess if you don't have any kind of takedown defense, but I mean, what else do you have going for you? He got ran down the entire fight. And I guess because he's so tall, he's used to fighting guys that get in close. But, man, use that reach. I don't know. Yes, Gabby and Cyborg are really good friends. They train together. I think Gabby trains with her, is like her jiu-jitsu kind of sparring partner as well. But, yeah, throw an oblique kick, for God's sakes. But who knows, man. I'm not in there. I don't know what Struve was thinking. But, like I was saying a second ago, we have some MMA news this week, guys. We have some really cool news, and we're going to talk about a couple of things before I get you guys out of here. Starting off again with the news we heard today, Amanda Nunes is going to be fighting Raquel Pennington at UFC 224 for that bantamweight championship. It's a fight I want to break down. I know the UFC promised Raquel this fight. A lot of people thought Amanda Nunes was going to go straight for the Cyborg fight, but as soon as Cyborg accepted this fight on short notice, you were going to basically, if Amanda was going to fight Cyborg in May, like they had scheduled her to do, that was going to be 3 fights in about 9 months for Cyborg. And as great as that sounds, you're not giving her any time to recover. You're not giving her any time to have a camp. And as much weight as she cuts, you got to give that girl some time. And she needs some time off anyway. You're going to burn through that division if you keep having her fight every 2 months, every 3 months. So I think it's good on the UFC for honoring that promise they gave to Raquel Pennington, as well as it gives some time to breathe for that 145 division and really allow it to kind of settle in and have some time off. Another women's main event, possibly. I don't know if they announced it to be the main event of 224, but it could very well be. We had some other news, though, and I think you guys are going to like this. We had a little bit of chirping, a little bit of rumbling of our boy Darren Till and his next upcoming fight and what possibly that could be or who that could be against or where it could be. And there's a couple of options, and they all make sense to me. Don't forget that Alistair fight news. You talking about Alistair Overeem versus Curtis Blades, 224? That'll be a fight, man. I think is it Curtis Blades or is it Walt Harris? Am I tripping? Hold on one second, guys. Let me know in the chat, but I'm pretty sure it was... Yeah, it's Curtis Blades. I was tripping. That's 225. Okay. Never mind. That's not the same card. That's 225. But yeah, Curtis Blades coming up in that heavyweight division. The thing I really like about Curtis Blades, and we'll just talk about this briefly, this is a long, long way off, so I'm not even close to picking a winner. Alistair obviously been doing the thing for years, considered one of the best strikers to ever grace the heavyweight division. K1 kickboxing Grand Prix champ. I think he was a Glory champ as well. But this guy, obviously, one of the best strikers to ever do it. Curtis Blades, coming up through this division, is one of the better wrestlers at heavyweight and is starting. I saw a picture with him yesterday training with Dwayne Ludwig, starting to figure out this striking thing. And at the end of the day, I've always said this with you guys on the podcast. I'll continue to say it. Wrestling, any kind of grappling, is a great base for MMA because at any point in the fight, you can control the fight without relying on something else, without relying on someone else to do what you want them to do. You can force them to do something you want to do if you are the better grappler. Strikers can't always control the fight because, again, there's no guarantee that fight will stay on the feet. If you are the better grappler, you can grab a hold of someone, work your way in, and take that fight to the ground, thus controlling the fight. Even if you're not the best striker. Mackenzie Dern, in a terrible example, even showed that against Yoder. When she finally got a hold of Yoder, that fight, give it 5, 10, or maybe 30 more seconds, she chokes her to death. So I like that fight. I cannot wait for it. I'm a big, big fan of Curtis Blades. That's in the future, though. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about the Derek Lewis Ngannou fight. I've heard stuff about even Brock Lesnar coming back for a super fight against Francis Ngannou. Who knows? All this stuff's all up in the air anyway. I have no idea. But what I do know is, like we were talking about, Darren Till has been kind of in the news lately, and it's because I think it's a lot of it's because they're going to be having the UFC Fight Night London coming up. I think it's March 17th, and we've got some news on that here at the W.A.D.E Concept later on in the show. But a lot of news swirling around Darren Till because he hasn't fought since last October. And a lot of people are kind of getting restless. When's Darren Till going to fight? When's Darren Till going to fight? Well, on his Twitter account, he comes out and says, look, it's not me. I've been ready to fight. The UFC just hasn't given me a fight. I want to fight people. I want to fight, Usman. I want to fight RDA. I want to fight Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I want to fight just anybody at this 170 division. Give me somebody. And I thought it was very interesting when he said RDA. And then, obviously, the UFC's got a card in Rio coming up. Darren Till proposed a RDA versus Darren Till fight in Rio. Both guys have lived there. Obviously, RDA's from Rio. Darren Till has lived down there for a little bit while he was training. I think that would be an amazing fight. The sheer athleticism and potential of a Darren Till, the pure boxing, his strength, his takedown defense. This kid is for real against, I don't know if RDA would take that fight because, again, he's waiting on Tyron Woodley and that whole situation. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for him to take that fight because, again, you don't want to get in this Cowboy Cerrone, Frankie Edgar situation where you end up becoming a jobber for one of these young guys, these young, hungry guys that are bigger, stronger, faster, and they take your spot in one fight that you worked your entire career for, right? So I don't know. I think that fight would be interesting. I think that Darren Till, as good as he is, would be in for a real fight. I don't think he walks through RDA. The Kamaru Usman fight interests me too, to see a guy with the level of takedown defense Darren Till has versus a guy that is probably one of the best, at least one of the strongest guys at 170. And again, the ceiling for either of these guys, we haven't seen even close to their ceiling yet as a fighter. So I think those would be great fights. And even the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight, I think would be amazing. But again, I think Stephen Thompson's camp is smart enough to say, look, we don't want any part of this guy right now because we are trying to still work our way toward this title fight. But it's safe to say with Darren Till trying to put his name out there more and more, they can't deny this fight. They can't deny this guy a fight in the next 3 or 4 months. I think he will have a fight soon. It will be on pay-per-view. Look, don't be shocked to see him at 225. Don't be shocked to see him at 226 when they just try to make this mega card for International Fight Week in July either. But you guys know how much of a fan I am. Shogun, peace out, brother. You guys know how much of a fight fan I am and how much I'm a fan of Darren Till. I cannot wait to see this guy, who he's going to fight next. The Cowboy fans, a little different than Edgar in my opinion. People like Nate Diaz, Cowboy, been known for starting slow. We kind of saw that. When I say that the Cowboy fight was, kind of him turning into a jobber, I don't mean it was because it was a parallel of fights between Frankie Edgar and Cowboy. I just think the same thing ended up happening. Both these guys took guys that are relatively young, hungry, undefeated, don't really have a name yet. Obviously, T-City, a little bit more well-known than Darren Till was at the time he fought Cowboy. But both guys very dangerous. And the other two guys, at least we'll say on the back nine of their career. And, for all intents and purposes, didn't look that great in their fight. Frankie looked a lot better than Cowboy did. But, in effect, the same thing happened. Almost the exact same thing happened with the step-in elbows and the finish. But yeah, these young guys are starting to replace some of the veterans in the UFC. And as sad as it is to see some of these big names go, it's really cool to see kind of the roots of the MMA scene begin to grow new trees and these new guys come up and take over. I'm really excited about MMA going forward. And I just hope that they get the opportunities to, be able to shine. And a guy like Darren Till doesn't just sit without a fight for the next, 7-8 months when that 170 division is a little clogged to begin with. Give this guy some fights. Let him show, let Kamaru Usman, let Santiago Ponzinibbio, let these guys show their talent and move up through those ranks. Ryan, I was one of the guys that said I thought Frankie was winning the fight to begin with, just based on, you never know who's actually winning a fight and what the game plan is until, you see a round or two and you're like, okay, this fight is going towards somebody. But in that first half of that first round, Frankie was the one initiating offense, moving forward, throwing combinations, controlling the pace. But it was all a part of the Ortega camp's game plan, right? To figure out where his power was, what his power level is, how quick is he on his double, and then from there, can we wrap him up? And obviously those questions were answered, and once they were, then the tide swayed toward Brian Ortega. And then Ortega stepped in with the elbow, and obviously things happened from there. But did I hear Rockhold's done at 185? He's getting bad on him. He's going to go up in the Gus fight. Yeah, I just heard that obviously this week on the MMA Hour. Ariel Helwani had Luke Rockhold on, and he was talking about a Bisping trilogy. Bisping kind of shut that down for now. But he also had been talking back and forth with Alexander Gustafsson before Rockhold's fight with Yoel Romero. There was some talk back and forth. And, Rockhold wants to move to 205. I think that'd be a crazy fight with him and Alexander Gustafsson. But we won't jump the gun. We'll see. I know Gus is still waiting for a title shot at 205. It'd be crazy to see Luke come up and fight at 205. Those AKA guys, man, sheesh, they're killers. And Luke is by far, one of the best fighters in the world, regardless of what happened last fight. Yoel's a freak. I mean, he's a freak athlete. It's hard to stop that flurry he puts on guys. Robert Whittaker's the only guy I've seen stop it. But that by no means makes Luke a less, formidable fighter. He is one of the top fighters in the world, and whatever he decides to do next, he's going to be great at. Oh, and he's the new face of Polo Ralph Lauren. So there you go. Dude's killing it in other aspects. But yes, that was another thing discussed this week. We might get a Luke Rockhold, Alexander Gustafsson fight in the future. Maybe not right now, but in the future. As well as just a couple of different things going on in the MMA kind of universe with Darren Till being talked about a little bit. Still, word out on the John Jones things and what really is going on with him. Some people are saying now that he might have been taking I guess I don't know the full kind of parameters of this testing, so I shouldn't really be speaking on it, but I'd heard through a couple of different outlets that there's, I guess, a new way of juicing or getting around a lot of different, like, World Anti-Doping Agency systems or United States anti-doping agencies, where they are, in effect, like, minimally using testosterone to boost certain aspects of their training. And with that, obviously, it's mixed in some sort of concoction, and then obviously, used for a pill or some sort of serum or whatever it is. But in those vats, they could possess, just like we were talking about with the creatine story, the vats that these products are used in or used to create in, could have remnants of other things that have been used in those same vats unless they're cleaned really well. And Joe Rogan's talked about this too with his On It supplements, that you have to clean a lot of those vats that you use to mix a lot of the things for your product, because if you don't, there's a lot of things that are left in there from things that are made previously in that vat, which could be steroids, which could be creatine, some sort of testosterone remnant, whatever it is, and that could leave trace amounts in his system. So there's still, still up in the air on John Jones. No one really knows what's going on with this guy. I don't think we're going to ever really know the actual truth on it, but none of it matters, right? All it matters is what USADA brings down on him. And if they bring something down on him that's more than a year and a half, 2 years, we're not going to see him fight Brock Lesnar. And like Ryan and I were talking about, we're going to see him fight. We're going to see Brock Lesnar probably fight Francis Ngannou. It makes all the sense in the world. And it would be a crazy fight. That draw would be nuts. So who knows? People are making a huge deal about Ortega, saying he visualizes his fights beforehand. I thought that was something normal fighters are doing. No, I think you're right. I think a lot of people, well, the thing with Brian Ortega, people are so fascinated with him because of, we all are sometimes prisoners of the moment, right? And I am too. For right at that fight happened, I was, wow, Brian Ortega, one of the best 145ers, which he is. But, when things like that happen, and when Conor McGregor won his second belt, and, you get to be a prisoner of the moment, and overanalyze things to build someone up more than they should be or more than they are. But that's the point of big fights, right? They make superheroes. They make guys become larger than life. But I think you're right. A lot of people visualize before their fights. Just like in any sport, you visualize before you go out and play a game. Obviously, in this sport, the stakes are much, much higher, right? You're not playing a game. You're fighting another person to see who is, the more skilled in combat hand to hand, right? So, yeah, I mean, everyone visualizes, but I think a lot of people are making a big deal about the whole Brian Ortega thing and his visualization and him talking about his brother and how he better not fail his brother, because it's a great story. Brian Ortega is a great story. He's a great guy. He's a great ambassador for the sport. And because, of the way he won that spectacular knockout. So if you think back, a lot of people, when Conor McGregor was coming up through the ranks, were talking about his visualization and his law of attraction and how he would call his shots and still go out there and do it. It's not the biggest deal in the world that he did it, but it is something to be able to say he visualized that and he made it happen. So people do get caught up in it a little bit, but at the same time, I'm sure he does visualize all of that. And for him to make it come true is a big feat. So good on him. Again, I'm not trying to undermine what Brian Ortega did at all. That was phenomenal. But a lot of people, visualize their fights and they do turn out for them and some don't. It's the fight game. What are you going to do? But other than that, we have one more story. It's not even really a story, but we'll talk about it. And then I have some announcements I will get to you guys on our way out of here. Let me get back to my notes here. And we will get you guys outie. There we are. So, there was some news coming out of the TriStar camp this week with George St. Pierre obviously going on the MMA Hour and saying, he does want to fight again in MMA and, named a couple of people, which was interesting. So, Firas Zahabi, George St. Pierre's head coach, and George himself have been clamoring for the last month and a half, and I've kind of been watching this story, and I kind of, shrugged it off to say, okay, this isn't really that much news. These guys are trying to do, what Conor has done for a long time or what John Jones did after his win. They want a big fight. They want a super money fight, right? Jay, I'll get to the predictions for UFC London. We're actually not going to do them on this episode, but I'll tell you when we're going to do them on this episode. But I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. But George St. Pierre has basically come out to Ariel Helwani and said, I'm going to fight in MMA again, but here's who I want, or here is who I think I can fight for it to still, maintain my legacy. And Ariel brought up Nate Diaz, or someone brought up Nate Diaz, and George St. Pierre said, I don't think that that's a fight I logically want to take because I already beat Nick Diaz. So if I beat his little brother, I was supposed to beat him. And if I lose, it destroys my legacy, which I get. But you never saw the old George St. Pierre talking like this. He was just the through and through warrior MMA fighter, would take on everyone to defend that belt. He didn't care who it was, right? What you're seeing a lot of out of George now is a fighter that wants to make a lot of money and get out of the game. And that's not a problem. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. But you see how this game has changed. You see how MMA in itself has flipped when some of the best, of all time, even to Chuck Liddell, who was going to get a multi-million-dollar contract to fight in Bellator probably, are coming back for these huge super fights. It's great they know their value, but you can see this has become more and more of an entertainment conglomerate than it is a true disciplined formatted sport, as it should, in my opinion, it should be. You're not going to see in any other sport. You wouldn't see this. A guy comes out of retirement, gets on the best team, wins the title right away, right? It doesn't happen in any other sport. But Jay, take it easy, brother. But it's going to happen in this case, and I'm sure if the UFC can find the right matchup for George St. Pierre, they would love to do it, of course. If George doesn't want the money fight but the fight for his legacy, yeah, if George wanted that fight for his legacy, it would be Robert Whittaker, 100%, or it would be Tyron Woodley to come back and fight the man that, has the belt that he held for so long. That would be a huge fight for his legacy. A guy that keeps calling himself the best welterweight of all time in Tyron Woodley, the actual best welterweight of all time, and George St. Pierre comes back to fight that guy. That would be the biggest fight for his legacy, especially after the way Tyron Woodley's called him out for so long, said George was scared of him. And George even mentioned to Ariel Helwani that he would like that fight. He thought that, when he was coming back to fight Bisping, this is his words, he wanted to fight Tyron Woodley. I don't know if I believe that, but it just didn't happen. But he's also thrown out the name Conor McGregor and said he could possibly move to 155. We're talking about George St. Pierre, who has traditionally fought at 170, but is 185, walking around 185-pound man, coming down to 155 to fight. That is tough, man. That's a 30-pound weight cut, and that's dangerous. Maybe a catch weight would work, but I understand you want to fight Conor. It's a big money fight. You want that big name recognition pay-per-view draw that Conor is, but that's a dangerous weight cut to go with. And if I'm George St. Pierre's team, I look at that whole spectrum, and the one guy that I would want to fight for my legacy would have to be Tyron Woodley. And for the money fight, I think that could still be a huge money fight. People don't like Tyron Woodley particularly. I think if you gave Tyron Woodley, not yet, but if you gave him a fight versus an RDA or versus one of these younger guys, and he wins that fight, he defends that belt again and in spectacular fashion, whatever it is, and he can start to get a little bit more behind him, then you bring George back and have George fight him for the 170 belt at this big, huge international fight week, whatever it is, on a massive card. Have them headline it, which wouldn't be at 226, maybe 227, 228, whatever it is. Have them headline it, and I think that's your money fight, because I don't see him going down and fighting Conor. I just don't, unless they do it at a catch weight. I don't see him making 55. I don't see it. But his team says they want that fight. They've also thrown out names like Ben Askren, which is odd to me if you're looking for a money fight. Not a lot of people in the MMA community, outside of the MMA community, know who Ben Askren is. But then there was another theory brought up, and I wanted to touch on this really quick. Someone said that he wanted a fight that would legitimize his legacy against an opponent that would be a big money fight. And a lot of people were bringing up Khabib Nurmagomedov, because Khabib, who has said after he wins 155, he would love to come up and challenge at 170. George St. Pierre versus Khabib Nurmagomedov at 170. If Khabib was champion, if he could somehow find a way to get into a fight with Tyron Woodley, would be a huge fight. George being one of the best MMA wrestlers we've ever seen versus Khabib, who is one of the most dominant Sambo and MMA wrestlers that we've seen. A guy that just ragdolls people, 25-0, never been beat, and has run through that division. That would be a huge fight as well. So George has his kind of pick of the litter, but it just depends on what the UFC is going to do and how they're going to, if they do make the fight, because George has also come out and said that Dana White doesn't like him, and Dana White aren't on good terms because Dana White, quote, doesn't control him. Probably not the best look if you're looking for that big money fight to insult the VP of the company or the president of the company. So who knows? I just know that it's very interesting to watch this George St. Pierre saga play out and see how the world of MMA has changed from, George St. Pierre, who was just taking off all challengers, just throwing them all out, defending that title like it was, it was his bank money, like all his savings, his life savings were that title. And to now where he is looking for this money fight and only speaking about legitimizing his legacy by taking on worthy challengers that don't destroy his legacy if he loses, which is kind of an odd irony there, where he wants to legitimize his legacy but won't take on people that would destroy his legacy if he lost. That's the reason you have a legacy, is you take on guys that are a threat to destroy it, right? So, but who knows? Who knows what happens with George St. Pierre? We'll keep an eye on it here at the W.A.D.E Concept, because that's what we do. Ryan says, actually, Woodley would be better. It would probably be one of the fights that could teach us a lot if we studied it. Oh, my goodness. I would have to lock myself in my room and break down hours and hours and hours of film on both of those guys, because that fight would be, Tyron Woodley possesses some of the biggest power at any weight division with his one-shot power that I've seen from anybody, right? His right hand is a Mack truck, versus George St. Pierre, who is the best welterweight to ever ever live, in my opinion. The best MMA wrestler. Could he take Tyron down? Could he hold Tyron down? Could he deal with the speed and the power of Tyron Woodley? Could he gas Tyron Woodley? Because Tyron Woodley's fight's a little smarter now to where he doesn't exert so much energy over a long period of time. Could George put the pressure on him and gas him? Who knows? That would be a crazy, crazy fight. But now we have a little bit of an announcement, kind of. Kelsey, if you're in the chat, ooh, Tristan, I don't know about that. I don't know if GSP would destroy Tyron. See, that's the debate, right? There are going to be some people that believe GSP, even after taking so much time off, and even after, going to be more time taken off, and him, at a later age could, quote, destroy Tyron Woodley. And Tyron, people forget, this guy's explosive, man. One of the fastest, strongest guys in that welterweight division that packs a punch and can wrestle. But Kelsey's in the chat, and this is what's going to happen. So next week, we are planning to do the W.A.D.E concept on the road from Rhode Island. You guys, I'm wearing the Rhode Island hat for a reason today. We are going to be going on the road to see Kels. So we're going to take the W.A.D.E concept on the road. We are going to do our MMA Weekly from the Kelsey complex. And we are going to live stream the UFC London card from the Kelsey complex. So we're going to have a little bit of a different setup. I'm not sure how we're going to do the live stream, but we're going to figure it out. Well, after this, we're doing a boat live stream. We're doing a Mile High live stream. We will be doing various different live streams, but in this case, we're going to be going to Kelsey's place, and we're going to do it from there. Haven't done one in the Northeast. It's going to be a little colder, so I'm rocking my Nike sweats. But it's going to be fun, man. I'm going to try to find a way to get my equipment up there, and we are going to do another Kelson Wade predictions MMA Weekly. And then we'll do our co-live stream, and Kelsey will be there with me. So that's kind of the announcement for the live stream, the UFC London card. So we're still doing picks. I'm gonna have some kind of punishment set up so that we can kind of film that and get that to you guys as well. I think that'll be fun. And so we'll talk about it. Kelsey and I will talk about it while I'm there. But that's kind of our announcement for next week. Woodley will show up with that 200 fight IQ. Will GSP, though? See, Tyron Woodley does, man. As boring as he is sometimes, as boring as his fights seem to be, he will find a way to find that one thing that George isn't good at, or one thing that George is slipping on, and, encompass that into his fight strategy and stick to it. Like, Tyron Woodley does not stray from his fight strategy in his fight camp. When they have a strategy put in place and a game plan, they will stick to it. By any means necessary, they're keeping that title. But yeah, that's kind of been this week's MMA news. A lot of rumblings, some no stories that are kind of out there, some non-news. But the biggest news is right now being obviously Brian Ortega will go on to fight Max Holloway. That'll be a huge fight. Watch Kelsey only get one punishment. Kelsey's probably going to beat me in predictions, but we're not going to think like that. The W.A.D.E concept is here to only listen to positive, or only have positive thoughts, and only listen to positive feedback. We don't want to hear anything about how Kelsey whips me in predictions every week, except last week I got the dub, 3-0, baby. But yeah, we're gonna be talking about more as we get going into UFC 223 and 224. Once we get closer to 223, it's really gonna ramp up, and we're really gonna see. First, let's all pray that Khabib and Tony both make weight, and we just get to the fight. But then after that, obviously, we've got some news on 224 with Amanda Nunes, Raquel Pennington, UFC 225 with Alistair Overeem, Curtis Blades. Those are crazy fights. I cannot wait to talk about them more. I need some Goku Spirit Bomb energy, all sent to me, none to Kelsey. None, Kelsey doesn't need any of that. She can find her own way, but the W.A.D.E concept, send all your energy to me. I'm going to need it as I go up to Rhode Island into hostile territory. This is enemy territory I'm going into, guys. Look, Kelsey has her own thing over there. She's been waiting on me to come up there to shake my predictions and to shake my confidence and have me waver in my confidence in my picks, but it's not going to happen. You know what I'm saying? When I go into enemy territory, I silence the haters. I feed off of the hate, and we're going to take that, and we're going to go undefeated on the UFC London card, and that's it. That's all I'm saying. And once punishments do come, and once we figure out what the punishments are going to be, maybe I'll take it easy on Kelsey. Maybe. We'll see. I'm a good guy. I don't like to rub it in when I win, even though I just did win again. But like I said, the punishment won't be anything too crazy. But that's what we're going to be doing. I'm excited for it. And from there, we don't have a lot to go over. Guys, keep tuning in. Keep supporting the channel. I appreciate you guys. I love talking to you guys in the chat. Ryan, appreciate you, my man. That was great. Some great convo we had going on. Tristan, as always, both Tristans. Jay, Shogun, Kels, obviously. Thank you guys so much. We will. I promise this channel will get there. We just have to keep pushing. Have to keep kind of breaking that door down. The way this stuff works with YouTube and all these different streaming sites. We just got to keep pushing, keep being positive, keep learning, keep growing as a channel, as a community. But everybody, make sure we keep the positive vibes going. Keep tuning in. This is the W.A.D.E concept, where you guys already know what we do here. And until next time, we are debating everything. Thank you guys so much. I'm out of here.